Exiting his Lambda-class shuttle, the Sith Lord Darth Vader trudged his way across the snow, his footprints leaving their mark with each step. Resting his eyes upon the remains of a Venator-class Star Destroyer, something on the ground catches his attention. Brushing away some of the fallen snow, he grasps the lightsaber hilt of Ahsoka Tano. Igniting the blade, Vader sees a convor fly overhead, and now realizes that another connection to Anakin Skywalker has been cut. Turning around, he keeps the lightsaber, his reflection poignant in the broken helmet of one of Ahsoka's legion. But what if Vader had never found Ahsoka's lightsaber? What if Ahsoka and Rex had not faked their own deaths? Would they fall to the might of the Empire? Well, as you're about to see, the whole landscape of Star Wars is going to be shifted. Vader swiveled his head to meet the terrified eyes of one of his new officers. A report of a crashed ship was the subject of the matter, and Vader strode across the bridge of his Star Destroyer to order the appropriate coordinates. Entering his personal shuttle, Vader landed on the snowy terrain, where the probe droids were doing a search of the wreckage. Entering the wreckage himself, he uses the Force to pull several durasteel panels blocking his path, before something caught his eye. Ducking under the collapsed ceiling, Vader scraped off the dirt, revealing an orange shard, clearly from a helmet. Not just any helmet, but that of Ahsoka's own 501st Division. Vader frantically paces about the wreckage, tossing any pieces of metal aside, looking for any sign of Ahsoka. The stormtroopers notice the commotion, and hesitantly venture inside, but Vader pushes them away. Now entering the remains of a hangar, he looked into the database with the assistance of an astromech, and saw all of the ships had departed. He was forced to conclude that until he saw her corpse, she was still alive. Just then, another officer walked in, reporting a transmission from the Emperor. Heading back to his Star Destroyer, he knelt to the feet of the hologram of his new master. He could feel what was left of his limbs aching from the heavy suit, but struggled through to meet the cold gaze of Sidious. Sidious got straight to the point, and asked him if he had found anything significant. Vader said no. Sidious looked at his new apprentice with great suspicion, but Vader continued to look at the ground. Their silence was broken by a stormtrooper declaring that their search had been concluded. Sidious ended the transmission with a glare, knowing that his apprentice had been hiding something from him. Heading back to his shuttle, Vader's urge to seek his apprentice overwhelmed him, and he knew he could not do it by himself. Enlisting the help of his most trusted troopers and inquisitors, he dispatched them to all of the known worlds, awaiting information. Several rotations would pass, before receiving transmission from his agents, reporting that an inquisitor had fallen into the hands of a dual-wielding Force user. Vader leapt from his meditation chamber, equipped his suit, and hopped into his shuttle, with a grace that did not match his terrifying form. He knew she would have escaped by now, but it would hopefully provide him with a lead. Landing on the tropical planet, he used his usual interrogation techniques, but could only suss out that she had not been here long. It appeared as if he was at a dead end. But now back in his meditation chamber, he hears a voice, and one he had thought was dusted in the memories of the past. It is the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn, telling Vader to be patient, and that the Force would give him the answers to his questions. Like on Mortis, Qui-Gon had left him confused. Searching for the presence of Ahsoka, he is guided to the Outer Rim, and the smuggler-laden planet of Thebesca. A light gathering of Imperials awaited his arrival, but Vader ordered them all away, and to ensure no ships exited the atmosphere. He had no need for such precautions. The sound of two blades igniting became the subject of his attention. Now looking at Ahsoka, he could see the same determination on her face, but also the remnants of mental pain. Not just any pain, but pain caused by him. Vader clutched his own head in agony, his lightsaber dropping to his side. The Emperor tried his best to drive all of his Jedi past from his memories, but this one still remained. Ahsoka's eyes widened at the dark presence she had been intending to battle, unpeeling itself layer by layer, revealing a small beacon of light. A beacon of light that was her old master. Looking around for any Imperial troopers, Ahsoka lifted Vader with the Force, and back to her makeshift shelter. Vader did not complain as Ahsoka removed the first and second layers of his mask. Looking into her master's eyes, she could see his former blue mixed with Sith yellow, and knew the light was returning to him. Clipping his lightsaber to her belt just in case, she knew she needed to leave, and the galaxy needed her again. Allowing Ahsoka to pilot his ship, he was relieved to have solved the mystery of the wreckage, and now he wanted revenge on the Emperor, who had been attempting to convince him she was dead. Landing aboard Bail Organa's ship, with whom Ahsoka had formed an acquaintance with, Vader played the role of a prisoner, as Ahsoka moved him to the medical bay. Several medical droids were on hand to remove Vader's armour, and his scars were exposed for Ahsoka to see. Even the normally fearless Ahsoka grimaced at what happened to her master. The droids began to work on the damaged wounds, many of which had been poorly treated, before placing him in a Bacta tank. Leaving Vader to heal, Ahsoka meets with the Organas. They are utterly confused. What had happened to the towering terror machine of Vader? Ahsoka details Vader's gradual return to the light, but Bail in particular is not convinced. He had heard about Obi-Wan's confrontation with him on Mustafar, and had listened repeatedly to Yoda at how one could not turn back from the dark side. But Ahsoka's determination was able to convince him otherwise. And besides, if he could justify his loyalty, he would be a valuable asset in the fight against the Empire. Ahsoka now stood in front of the Bacta tank, watching the improvements in the breathing of her master. In time, she would find out how exactly he had gained all these scars, but for now, she had another transmission to make. Leaving the floating Vader in the capable hands of Bail Organa's medical droids, Ahsoka headed off of the ship and into the Outer Rim, acting on a transmission from a rebel cell. Descending upon the salt pans of the planet of Selos, Ahsoka swooped over the scattering markings of Jupa worms and towards an isolated ATTE walker. Only those who were part of the Clone Wars owned those. Ahsoka salutes Captain Rex and Commanders Gregor and Wolf, but Wolf in particular is reluctant to help Ahsoka. But Ahsoka had an ace up her sleeve. Bringing up a hologram of Anakin practicing lightsaber routines, Rex leapt off of his seat and commands Gregor and Wolf to follow him. Wolf is still hesitant, his trust for the Jedi in pieces. He had been itching to contact the Empire since he had seen Ahsoka. Wolf's hand moves to a transmitter, but Ahsoka saw it first and swiped it away from his grasp. Whilst Rex unleashed his words of fury on Wolf, Ahsoka easily disassembles the walker with the Force and into a neat bundle, lifting it into the cargo hold, before the clones hopped aboard and made their way together back to the ship of Bail Organa. Once Ahsoka landed, she took them to the medical bay, where they were in for a shock. Although Vader's condition had improved, some of his burns were beyond recovery. Now on the operating table, he sat up and met the eyes of the clones. The clones salute Vader, but Vader looks at the floor, wallowing in his guilt and past. This would be a long road to recovery. Another figure walked into the room, this time of Bail Organa. If the clones had been shocked, Bail Organa was stunned into submission. He could hardly believe the once confident Jedi warrior reduced to a pitiable sight. He would need to report this to Obi-Wan. Rushing out of the room to get away from the horrid sight, he scrambled to one of the smaller rooms on the ship and pulled out an emergency holocom, his hands still shaking from the shock. The concerned and weathered face of Obi-Wan appeared, bracing himself for the worst news. Bail cannot bring himself to deliver the news, but is saved the trouble by a shadow in the doorway. Ahsoka stood proudly to tell Obi-Wan that her master was returning back to the light. Obi-Wan is of course skeptical, having witnessed the first-hand the destruction his former Padawan had caused. In fact, he had been spending his time on Tatooine dwelling over his failure to stop Anakin turning to the dark side. And looking over his shoulder, he could not risk losing Luke. Ahsoka could sense Obi-Wan's pain emanating from him, and pointing behind her, asks Obi-Wan how Anakin became such a mess. Obi-Wan cuts off the transmission immediately. Whether out of shame or wanting to protect Ahsoka he did not know, but the burden was too great for the once legendary Jedi Master. He tried to convince himself that Vader manipulated Ahsoka to the dark side, but he knew he had to face the truth at some point. On the other side, Ahsoka is not surprised by Obi-Wan ending the call. After all, it was likely to be a sensitive issue, but she couldn't help but detect the overwhelming feeling of guilt from Obi-Wan. He had obviously been involved in whatever accident had taken place. Helping a traumatized Bail Organa to his feet, she escorted him back to his quarters before returning to Vader. Bail was having the same thoughts as Obi-Wan. Although he was not a Force sensitive, he refused to believe how the Emperor's weapon of fear could have turned back to the light. He would not let him anywhere near Leia, or let her know of the real identity of her father. Perhaps Ahsoka was still too attached to the person Vader was. Back in the medical bay, the new cybernetics secretly commissioned by Ahsoka made their way to Vader, and they were now being attached to what remained of him. Unlike the procedure with Sidious, this was far less painful, and he found he enjoyed the lack of pain. Sensing Ahsoka to his side, there was a great deal of unease from her, and she knew that she wanted the truth from him. The problem was, he didn't know what the truth was. He had been suspecting for some time that Sidious had lied to him, but if his suspicions were correct, how would he find out what had happened? Squeezing the life out of a nearby syringe, he vowed to retrace his steps before it was too late. Just then, the old suit which laid in a pile in the corner of the room beeped several times. Vader immediately ordered Ahsoka to vault the suit off of the ship, where they avoided being tracked down. Ahsoka did as she was told, and broke the suit in as many places as possible with her lightsaber, before force pushing into space. But this lack of communication did not go unnoticed. The Imperial officer at the other end of the call quaked in his boots. To report to Vader had been terrifying enough, but the lack of a response meant a trip to the Emperor. Steeling himself, he asked his subordinates to clear the bridge, and knelt in front of the Emperor. The Emperor's look of evil turned into one of surprise at not seeing his apprentice. Seeing the terrified look on the officer's face, he quickly muttered that Vader was not answering his replies. In a fit of anger, Sidious force-choked the poor Imperial into unconsciousness, but knew he had been telling the truth. Sidious coldly thanked the officer, who was grasping his collar, and made a move to his ship. He would see to it personally that the matter be resolved. Leaving his secret location, Sidious swooped vertically into space, accompanied by 2 of his most loyal guards. Using the last known location of the tracking device, Sidious is directed to the core of the galaxy, and to the place he called his home. The planet of Coruscant was now a symbol for his ascension to power, and the Jedi Temple served as part of a quickly forgotten past. Finally landing on one of his newly constructed docking areas, Sidious strode menacingly towards the location of Vader's suit, oblivious to the surrounding civil unrest and the brutality being caused by his Imperial forces. A Mon Calamari native approached the Sith Lord, begging for him to change some of his anti-alien policies, but Sidious swept him aside, his royal guards stunning the poor aquatic with their force pikes. The beeping from his transmitter became louder with each step, and now he was in the grounds of the renovated Imperial Palace. Taking paces onto the stone-flagged courtyard, Sidious was greeted by an unexpected sight. Pieces of Vader's suit were scattered across the plaza, with the central console flashing in the middle. Sidious quickly gathered the pieces together with the Force, and from what he could see, the damage had been done by rough lightsaber strikes. None of this made sense to the Sith Lord. Either his apprentice had been defeated, or he had thrown away the suit. The latter was more likely, as he would have likely felt the fall of his apprentice. But why had he chosen here, and why had he not responded? Surely he had not fallen to the pesky rebels. He would need to take a more direct approach. Back aboard the ship of Bail Organa, the former Sith Lord Darth Vader completed his transformation into his new suit. Searching for Sidious, he found that he had lost the connection, by virtue of beginning to return to the light, and not becoming dependent upon pain for his power. Looking at his lightsaber to the side, he asked Ahsoka to cut through it, just as she had done with his suit. Ahsoka wasted no time, and one of Vader's components of terror had now been removed. It could not undo the damage he had already done, but it was a step forward. He needed a replacement before the Emperor tracked him down. Vader would not be able to hide for long. Contrary to the medical advice of the droids, Vader leaves the planet in his suit, along with Ahsoka and the former clones, looking for parts for his new lightsaber and a kyber crystal. Reaching out like he had done as a Jedi, Vader struggles to meditate like a Jedi, and needs the guidance of Ahsoka. Unlike with the Sith meditation taught by Sidious, Vader now had to try and let go of his emotions, something he had never been able to do anyway. Their attempts are useless, and now running out of fuel in the Outer Rim, they are forced to make an emergency landing. If Vader thought that his pain was now over, the navigation computer begged to differ, as they were now heading for his former home planet of Tatooine. The only consolation was that this was the last place Sidious would search. Finally touching on the sand, Vader's new boots prevent the irritating sand from getting through, but he was focused on a Force presence. Ahsoka beside him could sense the same presence, and they set off, leaving the former clones to guard the ship. Even though they had experience of the vicious sandstorms on Tatooine, it impedes their progress, and it is dusk by the time they arrive at the mysterious presence. The sandstorm had now abated, and the twin suns were lighting the surface with an orange hue. One hut, however, shone more prominent to the pair than the others. Heading towards its entrance, Ahsoka ignited her blade to provide more lighting, and they knocked on the open front entrance. The sound of jostling forced Ahsoka to tighten the grip on her blade, and they heard another lightsaber ignite. The same battered face that she had seen on the holoprojector of Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared. She had no idea he had lived here. There had to be a purpose to this. Ahsoka deactivated her lightsaber in relief, but Obi-Wan keeps his ignited, seeing the shadow cast by the tall, intimidating suited figure behind Ahsoka. The usually confident Ahsoka was unsure what to do. The former master and Padawan were staring at each other with intense hatred. The apprentice stepped forward, forcing Ahsoka to move into Obi-Wan's hut, and Obi-Wan further back. But then the Chosen One felt what he had been looking for. Stretching out his new hand, a lightsaber hilt zoomed from a small chest and into his palmed glove. Igniting it, he inspected the blue blade, and again, he collapsed to the ground. Ahsoka rushes to her master's aid, but Obi-Wan stood back cautiously, although now deactivating his blade. He could feel the guilt in the being he had left on Mustafar. Ahsoka removed her master's mask, and she could see the pain in his eyes, memories of the destruction he had caused with this lightsaber flooding back to him. Shifting her position, Obi-Wan now saw that the light he had felt was not a mere vestige. Anakin Skywalker had returned. This had been not a part of their plan. Yoda had told him that one never returned from the temptations of the dark side. But then again, Anakin had never been one to follow the rules. Anakin got back to his feet and ignited his blue blade again, feeling its warm connection returning to him. He was grateful for Obi-Wan keeping the object, but like Ahsoka, he wanted answers. The night was spent discussing their version of the events, with Ahsoka ensuring that Obi-Wan and Anakin did not threaten to kill each other again. The conversation would inevitably shift to the events on Mustafar, and it is at this point Ahsoka couldn't take the strain any longer and headed outside. Looking into the distance, the suns begin their rise, and the Togruta could hear the voice of a woman calling for somebody called Luke. In that moment, Ahsoka knew Obi-Wan's purpose for being on Tatooine. Ahsoka could see the figure of a young boy sprinting across the sand into his hut. She didn't need to meditate to sense his powerful presence in the Force. The shadow of Anakin appeared beside her, and he too could sense Luke. Now told the entire story by Obi-Wan, everything Sidious had told to him had been a lie. He would not allow him to go anywhere near his children. Obi-Wan stepped out of his home and in front of Anakin and Ahsoka, cautiously making his way to the Lars' home, failing to notice a droid in a nearby rock. His previous visits had been fraught with hate from Owen Lars. Anakin is also tentative, conflicted by horrible memories of his past life and his eagerness to see his child. How would Luke react? How would the Lars react? There was only one way to find out. Struggling past where he had buried Shmi, Anakin and Ahsoka stepped towards the entrance, as Obi-Wan remained in the background, not wishing to cause any additional animosity. Anakin walked forward and knocked. The door opened, and it was Owen, who met the tall, intimidating suited figure, fear in his eyes. That was until he saw the face of the man. Owen's face immediately turned to surprise. Obi-Wan had told him that the light in Anakin had been destroyed, but here he was again. But Owen knew why Anakin had arrived here. For Luke. Having heeded to Obi-Wan's request to raise Luke, he tried to drive the Jedi aspect of life away from him, having seen the chaos there caused. Just then, Luke rushed to the entrance and stood beside Owen. Looking at Anakin, he felt a bizarre sensation wash over him, their connection growing stronger with each passing moment. Owen realised he could not deny Luke from his destiny. Beru also arrived from the garage, wondering what the commotion was all about. Seeing Anakin standing at the door, she looked at Owen and knew their time with Luke was over for now. Luke didn't quite understand what was happening, but Beru told him to go. Luke followed Anakin and Ahsoka out of his home, as Owen and Beru bid farewell. The walk back to Obi-Wan's home was awkward, as Anakin was unsure what to do with Luke, but thankfully, Ahsoka was able to keep Luke distracted. Upon reaching Obi-Wan's home, Anakin did what he thought best and began to teach Luke about the Force. Lending Luke his lightsaber, Luke's natural affinity with the Force could already be seen, but Anakin needed to speed Luke's training, were they to defeat the Emperor. Suddenly, the lighting in the room dimmed. Gazing upwards, the planet was becoming shadowed by a large Star Destroyer. The Emperor was homing in on his location. They had to get off of the planet fast. Sending a transmission to the clones, their ship soon entered from the mist of sand, and they all jumped aboard, with Obi-Wan carrying all of his possessions in a small box. Zooming off into space, it is too late. The Star Destroyer has already noticed them. Anakin takes hold of the controls, weaving his way in and out of the asteroids and debris, reducing Rex to a spectator. Anakin knew he would be unable to outrun the destroyer, so resorted to his favourite option, a full-on attack. Assigning roles for the remaining passengers, Anakin knew of the schematics of the destroyer, having played a hand in its construction. Diving his way down to the bridge, Anakin almost touches the glass, and Ahsoka uses the laser cannons to fire the large bridge tower. The surprise of the attacks mean the shields have not been activated, and the support beams collapse. Anakin swoops upwards, allowing for Rex to use his missile bolts to perfectly take out the deflector shield generators. Most would be content to escape such a devastating weapon, but Anakin is not. Dropping down one more time, Anakin uses the front-mounted laser turrets to take out two of the turbo lasers. But in the excitement, he fails to notice several TIE starfighters heading in his direction, exposing the side of his ship to cannon fire. The TIE pilots take advantage, setting one of the wings attached to the sliding doors ablaze. The ship now tilts to one side, the broken wings scraping the surface of the Star Destroyer, and they're heading towards a control tower. Relinquishing the controls, he separates the two ships with the Force, before taking back into the air. Behind him, the TIE starfighters collide into the surface of the Star Destroyer, failing to descend as accurately as Anakin had done. The Star Destroyer begins to implode, the impact of the fighter setting off a chain reaction which terminates its existence. The Jedi and the clones are oblivious to this, however, as they focus on nursing their wounded ship back to Alderaan. Heading once again to the Tantive 4, Anakin felt happy for the first time since the Clone Wars. Not only had he found a new lightsaber, but he had found his son, another connection to Padme. Now he had to find his daughter. Aboard the ship, with Luke and Obi-Wan beside him, he walks into Bail Organa, who stares at him coldly. Anakin does well not to tap into the dark side and choke the life of somebody who had been a friend to Padme. Obi-Wan could sense the palpable tension and beckon Bail to one side, explaining that all of what Ahsoka told him was true. Bail cannot believe it, but looking at the expectant Luke, he knows it to be true. Opening a side door, Leia rushes out and sees both her adopted father and her biological father. Looking at Luke, she could sense a certain familiarity about him. It was her brother. Bail attempts to block her, but Obi-Wan stops him. This was Anakin's time now. Seeing Anakin with his children almost made Obi-Wan forget that there was still a Sith Lord at large, but it was a threat that would need to be dealt with as quickly as possible. The sudden entrance of Luke and Leia into the life of Anakin was the final seal for his transformation to the light, and this time he was determined to not allow his fear of loss to turn him to the dark side. Whilst Luke and Leia were as gifted in their connection to the Force as their father, Anakin was unwilling to let them face the darkness of Sidious so soon. They needed time to be trained, time he just didn't have. Unsurprisingly, news of the nearly constructed Death Star soon reached their ears, ready to decimate any rebelling planets. Anakin knew the damage it could cause, having shamefully overseen its construction. The resource-limited rebellion would not stand a chance if Anakin didn't act soon. With his trust in Anakin fully restored, Obi-Wan decides to reveal the secret location of Yoda, and sends Luke and Leia to his little green friend on Dagobah. There they would be kept safe, and be prepared were anything to happen to Anakin, Ahsoka or Obi-Wan. After receiving intelligence from one of the rebel cells, the trio headed for the location of the nearly completed Death Star with a prototype vessel. Anakin hated the superweapon, as it would only stir discontent amongst the galaxy's civilians. Palpatine was too engrossed in his power to consider people being able to oppose his reign of tyranny. Approaching an asteroid hovering near the station, Anakin could already feel the presence of Palpatine, his evil like a poison in his mind. Activating the cloak projectors, the Death Star would be able to detect his magnetic signature, but the surprise of seeing such a ship would be sure to buy some time. Dropping downwards and acting like a piece of debris, they are puzzled when they manage to make it into the hangar without any trouble. But then it dawned upon them. Palpatine was waiting for them. Anakin performed one of his smoother landings, and the trio wasted no time, rushing into the battle station. It is not as they had expected. The hangar was deserted, and now the presence of Palpatine was being masked. They decide to split up, with Anakin searching the upper levels, and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka the lower ones. Anakin puts his hood over his head, cutting his way through the stormtroopers who patrolled the corridors. Entering a large control room, he saw many officers at their areas, and lifting them all up from their chairs, crushes all of them with the raise of his fist. Behind him, Palpatine started to cackle. Back on the lower levels, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan were carefully treading their way through when they entered one of the detention blocks. Something felt amiss. Each taking one side of the corridor, they simultaneously opened all of the doors with the Force, and out of most of them stepped out an Inquisitor. After learning of the defection of his apprentice, Sidious had easily turned all of the Inquisitors against him for this very purpose. But having beaten one Inquisitor previously, Ahsoka was confident she could do the same to the others. Whilst Obi-Wan took advantage of his superior dueling abilities, Ahsoka used her Force abilities, deactivating the lightsaber of one of the Inquisitors and turning it upon the others. They are unable to cope, either being killed or severely wounded. Leaving the lives of the Inquisitors to fate, Obi-Wan feels a shockwave in the Force, as it was evident that Anakin had found Palpatine. Taking one of the station's turbo lifts to the top, each passing moment felt agonizing, Anakin's life on the line. The lift doors open, greeting Ahsoka and Obi-Wan with the sight of 20 dead Imperial officers. Sprinting down a side corridor, Anakin suddenly slid across the floor in pain in front of them, his mechanical hand losing some of its nerve endings. Obi-Wan pushes Anakin back into the battle with an enhanced Force push, and joins the battle with Ahsoka. Ahsoka's fight doesn't last long, as she only manages to partially deflect Palpatine's Force lightning, the rest coursing through her body. Anakin can no longer hold his anger. Triggered at seeing Ahsoka slide to the wall, he presses his attack, seamlessly combining with Obi-Wan to deflect what seemed like a dozen blades at the same time. But then it was Obi-Wan's turn to fail to deflect Palpatine's Force lightning, skidding to a halt beside Ahsoka, albeit in better condition. Getting back on his feet, he runs towards the battle, but is stopped by the closing of blast doors. Using his lightsaber, Obi-Wan attempts to pierce through the door just like Qui-Gon had done, but these doors were far thicker. He is saved from another attempt by a sound of beeping and footsteps behind him. Rex, Gregor and Wolf are accompanied by R2-D2, who have been in Bail's service up to this point, and the faithful droid promptly unlocks the doors. The various panels of the door slide open, and Obi-Wan sees Anakin brushing off the dust from his suit, standing beside the fallen Palpatine. Anakin took one last look of disgust at his former master, before rushing over to Ahsoka, who looked weak. The clones grab a nearby stretcher, and R2-D2 roots their way out. By now, all of the Death Star's defenders were aware of Palpatine's fall, and were quick to pursue the assailants. But due to Palpatine's overconfidence, the number of Imperials was limited, allowing Anakin and Obi-Wan to pick them off. Along the way, Obi-Wan contacts Bail Organa, telling him to bring reinforcements, as they had the opportunity to strike a fatal blow to the Empire. Anakin and Obi-Wan were unaware of the clones piloting the ship, nor of the rebel reinforcements arriving to destroy Palpatine's creation. Ahsoka's condition was paramount. Anakin would not allow the one who had helped him see the light to fall. Rapidly heading to Dagobah, Yoda began to heal Ahsoka with the Force, her life still in the balance. Finally, the female convor Morai circled overhead to the relief of Anakin. Ahsoka's eyes opened, confused at her surroundings. Looking at Anakin, Obi-Wan, Luke and Leia, Morai gently rested on her arm. She owed them her life. That is it for What If Vader Never Found Ahsoka's lightsaber. If you enjoyed this What If, please like this video, and if you're new to this channel and my other channel, subscribe for more What Ifs. And as always, leave a comment on what if you'd like to see next and how I can improve my videos. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.